All right. Hi, everybody. This is Stephanie with the Animal Protection Society, and we are going to get started here. I'm going to introduce Claudine Wilkins, who is the founder of the Animal Protection Society and Animal Law Source, as well as being an animal law expert. So Claudine, I am going to turn this over to you. And
thank you.
You are good to go.
Thank you, Stephanie, and welcome everyone to this webinar where we will discuss the connection between COVID-19 and our pets, as well as how it's affecting the people who are involved with animals, either because of their profession or their passion. I'm honored to host this webinar and honored to have been the founder of the Animal Protection Society, which is a culmination of 30 years experience, starting out as a prosecutor a long time ago who saw animal cases falling through the cracks and my own colleagues not really seeing the connection between these cases and human cases and public safety. And I've watched animal law and animal issues progress over the last 3 decades and have had the wonderful opportunity to meet some very intelligent people who've become good friends and who have made the Animal Protection Society what it is today, which is a resource for anyone involved in animals or just love animals. We have state-specific resources to help answer questions dealing with your daily professional lives and to find answers to everything from animal cruelty to the link between human and animal cases and to build awareness within our communities. It's also a division of Animal Law Source, which is a program. You can literally go on our website and just click on a subject matter and pull up resources on how, where, when, and what to know about that particular subject matter. So this work includes many things, but one of them is exactly what we're doing today, which is this webinar. And let me tell you a little bit about how the webinar is going to go down today. Basically, we are allowing you, the audience, to answer or ask questions, and we hope to give you the answers today. We have people from all over the world. We have folks from Hawaii, Vermont, New York, a lot in Georgia. So we're excited to have this. This will become a series during this time of COVID-19. And if you haven't signed up yet, you can go to our website, theanimalprotectionsociety.com, go straight to our COVID-19 page, and you will see how to sign up for that. The breakdown is going to be like this. I'm going to introduce our panelists and our keynote speaker. We'll let our keynote speaker tell us what we need to hear today, and our panelists will share some insight of what they're dealing with, and then we will take questions from the audience. After that, we'll have a quick wrap up. If we haven't gotten to your question, we will ask our panelists to send those answers to us, and we will post those on our website. So let's get started. I'm excited to introduce our first and keynote speaker, Dr. Jay Tischendorf. Dr. Jay Tischendorf is the founder and director of the American Ecological Research Institute. He is a veterinarian and a wildlife biologist with experience across a wide range of the environmental and biomedical realms. His special interests include emerging and zoonotic infectious diseases, One Health, aviation and wildlife hazards, and endangered species. Dr. Jay has been employed in the human and animal health pharmaceutical industries and serves as a consultant and a trainer for the National Animal Care and Control Association and the National Wildlife Operators Association. He's a member of the Pet Industry Joint Advisory Council Zoonosis Committee. He conducts wildlife field research on carnivores, raptors, reptiles, and hosts training programs on wildlife tracking, animal immobilization, survival, parasitology, and infectious diseases. His work has taken him to all 50 states and internationally, and he's a frequent presenter at veterinary, wildlife, and other conferences. I'm also honored to say that he will be our keynote speaker at our 22nd annual Animal Protection Expo here in Atlanta, Georgia in September. We're going to mention the dates on that later. So take it away, Dr. Tischendorf. Please let us know what you found in the last few weeks regarding COVID in pets.
Well, Claudine, thank you. And Stephanie, thank you for riding herd on all of us today. Appreciate everybody that's tuning in and participating from not just around the country, but around the globe. And a big shout out to the Animal Protection Society and all the work that you do and the passion that you put into this, Claudine, with you and your team and all of the people. So Yeah, good news, folks. Really, honestly, we are in some difficult circumstances, but I have no doubt that we will get through this. And I realize for many people, and more each day, it's devastating financially, economically. But we stay the course, as they say, and if we can hang in there and do the right thing from a medical and biological risk management perspective, and that really amounts to the stay-at-home guidance that most of us are following, we will get through this with far fewer issues and deaths and illnesses than we would otherwise. So as difficult as it is, we need to sacrifice. And I know it's easier said than done, and it sounds like lip service, but we're going to survive this. Fortunately, this COVID-19, as bad as it is, it could be a lot worse. And so I think some of the questions we're going to deal with today relate to possible mutations and things like that. Knock on wood, so far we haven't seen. I don't anticipate we will, but anything is possible. The good news from a pet standpoint, and I know that's what many of us really wanted to hear about today, is I said 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago on a conference call webinar with the National Animal Care and Control Association that at that time we had absolutely nothing to worry about in regard to pets. They were neither a risk or at risk. Now, since then, and things are changing, and that's not surprising with infectious diseases and maybe especially zoonotic diseases like this one, pets have proven to become infected with the virus in a few very rare cases, and that includes 2 dogs that tested positive after their owners tested positive. That was over in Hong Kong, and then more recently in Belgium, a cat also tested positive. It actually came down with some clinical signs. The dogs did not. They never had clinical signs. This one cat in Belgium did, but also, again, it was closely associated with the human owner, a guardian that had COVID-19. No evidence at this point that cats or dogs can transmit the virus. And keep in mind, we're now up to hundreds of thousands of documented COVID cases around the globe in people. And this is what we're looking at as far as the animal issues so far, just these 3 cases in domestic animals in a real world setting. And then I think many of you realize too, just earlier this week, a tiger at the Bronx Zoo tested positive and was showing clinical signs. And then some of its cohorts, another tiger and a couple of lions, were sick, but because of the challenges of diagnosing and testing those animals, you've got to mobilize them to get samples. And nobody necessarily wants to do that if it's not critical. We still don't know for sure that those animals had COVID. I think most of us are assuming they do. But again, no evidence that those animals were transmitting it onto people. We think they were exposed through an asymptomatic zoo worker who introduced the virus. So yeah, please don't panic. Our risk of contracting other diseases from our animals is certainly a lot greater than it is with COVID-19. And it's at times like this that we really need to embrace our pets and give them the love and sharing the love that they give us. So yeah, please, nobody, panic and decide that you need to give up your animals because of concern over COVID. We will keep you posted if things change. I don't anticipate we're going to see substantial changes in that guidance at this point. The CDC and all of the other World Health organizations, which I agree with, have really good guidance, folks. And honestly, these are things we should be doing anyway, regardless of whether there's a pandemic sweeping the planet or not. Just on any given day, it's really good protocol and practice to wash our hands before and particularly after we've dealt with our animals. As much as we love to be kissed and licked by them, it makes sense not to do that. We should not share their food and eat, that ice cream cone you want to let your dog lick and then lick it yourself. Not a good idea. Obviously it makes us feel good and warm and fuzzy, but from a biological disease standpoint, microbial standpoint, find other ways to get that warm fuzzy from your animal. And then just be aware again that there's a lot of other diseases out there that they can transmit to us. And knock on wood, my head, it doesn't happen very often, but that risk is there. And just having that awareness rather than the fear, I think, is really what should rule our days. I do a lot of work with mountain lions and other large carnivores. And I always tell people, they have a reputation for being dangerous, but the bigger issue is really they just want to do their own thing. And if we respect that and have that awareness of what the risks might be and don't put ourselves in those positions where we're exposed to those risks, everything will be fine, largely will. So remember those basic hygienic rules, keep our animals bedding, dishware, utensils and equipment clean, and we'll talk a little bit later on about disinfection. But those are just, the basic ground rules. If we follow those, keep our hands clean, don't touch our faces, most of us will come out of this, the majority will come out of this very, very well. So, excuse me, Claudine, I will turn it back to you. I do want to take time to have questions, and I know everybody else has some input they'd like to share as well. So thanks for the chance to.
When you were saying that, ironically, a lot of people don't realize they use the same sponge to rinse off their own dishes and their dog dishes. So have a separate sponge, don't forget. One of the questions that came across in the last 2 weeks, Dr. J, was there's studies out there going on regarding viruses in this COVID-19 in animals. You know, some folks are asking, can we trust these studies? And one of the things we're going to do is have a link to all the things that we know are vetted through us and through you and the CDC to make sure that whatever we post has been vetted as best it can be. So one of the questions too that we got is, if someone comes down with COVID-19 and they have to leave their home due to an emergency or via ambulance, and they're leaving their pets behind, what should we be telling these first responders about the pets, how to handle them, and especially in the time that we don't have PPE, personal protection for everyone? And then once they're brought to the shelter, what kind of guidelines can you give us? And then lastly, how do we disinfect properly? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and I always smile when people use that term vetted. It gives me a good feeling because, you know, that does imply this sense that this information has been not necessarily guaranteed, but it's been looked at by experts. And being a vet, it makes me feel good that people equate that word with trust, honesty, and credibility. So I don't know if that's where it originated, but that's how we'll use it. There have been some studies. Again, we're learning as we go. A lot of this is new. I do think next to gravity on Earth, the next most powerful force is the scientific method, where we take a hypothesis and we test it, and honestly test it to disprove it. And if we can't disprove it, then we accept it and say, hey, you know what, this seems to be the fact as we know it, as best we can figure it out and interpret things today. So the studies that are going on right now, many of them are very, very good. They're being done under rapid circumstances and difficult circumstances. But I think particularly if they're peer reviewed by other experts in the field, then it is something we can hang our hat on, knowing that, you know, these diseases and pathogens don't always read the book, and they can change, and we can learn more about them as we go along. But you start somewhere, right? Every great oak got to start from a little nut who held its ground. So we'll take what we can, and particularly if it's peer-reviewed scientific experimentation data, I think it is really, really valuable. Do want to mention there has been at least one study that actually looked at ferrets, cats, and dogs and exposing them to the COVID-19 virus. And basically in that order is the concern. And again, fairly minimal. Ferrets, as it turned out, tended to be the most concerning, because they could acquire the virus and, at least in an experimental setting, transfer it on to other ferrets. We didn't look to see if they could transmit it to humans, but there is potentially that concern, obviously, with all of these. And so we'll have some guidance on that here in a moment. Cats were also, and it's not surprising, cats have their own coronavirus that we've known about for years. That's feline infectious peritonitis. That's a coronavirus that mutates and becomes pathogenic or pathologic in the cats. That's been a problem for cat lovers for a long time that we've known about, and that is a coronavirus. So cats can also get the COVID-19, as we've discovered. However, they don't seem to be able to transmit it to other cats as readily, and presumably then less likely to transmit it to people. And then finally, dogs, which we also know have their own coronaviruses. They have a gastrointestinal coronavirus we've known about for a long time, typically shows up in very young puppies. And then also a respiratory coronavirus, separate from COVID-19, but it is a corona, so they seem to have the right receptors and cell types for the virus to, for coronaviruses to act. But there again, they were the least likely to pick up the virus, and no demonstration, no evidence that they could transmit it on. So I can tell you from a wildlife biology perspective, black-footed ferrets are one of the most endangered species on Earth, and there is real concern. There's probably less than 200 or 300 of them in the wild in reintroduced settings, more in captivity in zoos, just like the Malayan tiger that came down with COVID. So some real concern in the ecological community that the black-footed ferret population is potentially at jeopardy because of this virus. Those of us that have pet ferrets need to just be aware, again, the potential for interaction there with us and the ferrets and the virus. Something to be aware of. Has not happened globally, as far as I know, and certainly not in the United States. We've had no cases of ferrets contracting COVID, or certainly not transmitting it to their owners. So, but again, the potential is there. And as they say, out of an abundance of caution, everybody should, again, wash hands before and after handling their pets. And really good guidance from the CDC, and I think they've said this for a long time, is if you have an infectious disease of any kind, it is really best to avoid, as much as we'd like to have contact with our animals when we're sick, and they often want to have contact with us because they know we're sick. We need to avoid that. If it's an infectious disease, it really makes sense. Have somebody else take care of those animals while you're sick. And then when you're better is the time to love them up and recapture that lost time. But particularly now with the pandemic, it really is good advice. If you're sick, don't have close interactions with your animals. And if by chance, again, and this leads into your question, Claudine, if you don't have somebody that can assist you in taking care of your animal, then you've got to find somebody that can, and that's where a call to animal services or human services to get some support is going to happen. And if you're the first responder that's called out to those situations, I like to think you've got the appropriate personal protective equipment, but I realize many might not, and so you are faced with a difficult circumstance. The animal really that you're going to pick up and return to a shelter or a foster parent is really no more a risk than any other item in that household that you might have contact with. But having said that, if that person had COVID, many items in that house are probably contaminated. And although the animal very likely is not infected with the virus, it certainly could have the virus on its fur and be basically what we would call a fomite, carrying the virus around externally. And so good shampoo, good bathing, hygiene, both with the animal and yourself, once you're done handling it, would be very good. You know, again, N95 face masks, full PPE if we're dealing with these cases. And if you're in a situation where you are called into that, you may have some tough internal decisions to make. We all sign up in those cases to do the job, but it's predicated on the belief that you're going to have the appropriate equipment. So if you don't, that may be a situation to say, hey, listen, I'm willing to put myself in harm's way in the normal course of my work, but that's where I have the right equipment. And if you can't provide the equipment, I can't do this. So again, I don't have the great answer for you there, but yeah, shampoo, disinfect that animal. A good bath and good cleansing shampoo will mechanically remove a lot of things, dirt, organic debris, and presumably virus or bacteria that's on the animal. Following that up with a disinfecting shampoo or wipe. And there are some products, I don't want to get into product names and brand names, but there are activated hydrogen peroxide shampoos and wipes that are known, that particular compound is known to be effective against COVID-19. And then there's some other more general, for instance, chlorhexidine type disinfecting shampoos that, while not necessarily demonstrating efficacy against COVID, they do have efficacy against a lot of other microbes. And so that would be a good alternative choice as well. But there may not be a one size perfect fits all for everybody, for every circumstance. But again, that awareness, not fear, just understanding what the potential danger might be and doing our best to minimize that. Again, bathing that animal as soon as possible, trying to get a good safe disinfectant, shampoo or wipes on the body of that animal across its fur, and then isolating it, ideally quarantining it because it has had potential exposure, quarantining it for 14 days, which has been the standard overseas with animals. For instance, the 2 dogs I mentioned that were taken from the COVID positive individual, they were quarantined, and in the process of that were tested and proved to be positive for the virus, although again, no clinical signs and no evidence that they were transmitting it. But does that help answer that question?
Yes, thank you very much so. And you had mentioned something about what pet owners can do today. And I recently wrote an article called Pets, the Pandemic and a Plan. And in that, it gives you a step-by-step thing you can do today as a pet owner. And we don't think about this only in times of tragedy or emergency, but go ahead and make that list that can be copied, emailed, and texted to someone, and listing your pet's names, their descriptions, where their pet essentials are, their pet food, medicines, leashes, toys, treats, crates, any other contact, veterinarian's contact, what their routine is. For example, if your dog Buddy is aggressive around kids or is afraid of lightning, you want to put that all on a list so that somebody can read that should you get sick and you don't have time to communicate. You have that already somewhere. I like to tell people to have that as a copy to their veterinarian's office in their medical file. So if you read that article, there's a list of things how animal shelters can, a guideline for animal shelters as well as pet owners. But let me go ahead and talk about we're going to come back to you, Dr. J. I appreciate that. We have a great list of panelists here, and let me go ahead and introduce them to you because they're going to give you their thoughts, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. If you could give a little wave to us, I'd like to introduce first Madi Nix. And Madi is representing rural parts of Georgia for us. She is the director of Habersham Animal Care and Control in Clarksville, Georgia, and has been in animal services for over 10 years. And we have Cindy Wiemann, the director of the Newton County Animal Control. She's also president of the Georgia Animal Care and Control Association, as well as on the board of the National Animal Control Association. We also have Jason Smith, who is the deputy manager of the Companion Animal Equine Division of the Georgia Department of Agriculture. And Venessa Sims is also the director of emergency management for the Georgia Department of Agriculture. She's been there for over 20 years. She's also the president of the National Alliance of the State Animal and Agricultural Emergency Program and the Georgia State Coordinator for the Emergency Support Function for the state of Georgia. So Madi, let's start with you. Could you tell us what you would like our audience to hear?
All right, well, hello from rural Georgia. Thanks for having us. We have seen so many changes during this pandemic. This has just been such an evolving situation. It has had its challenges, especially in the animal shelter and animal control world. But it has also definitely encouraged us to find creative and positive ways to make sure that we're still able to serve our community as an essential entity, and that we're still able to be there for the animals as well. We've actually had an amazing turnout after the initial shock of everything kind of wore off to people around here, and they started to realize that this pandemic was going to be here a while. We almost cleared out our shelters from adoptions. We did 74 adoptions in 2 weeks here, and that is something that has been unheard of. So there are points to this that we have really been appreciative of our community.
Great. Can I ask you, are you seeing people fearful of coronavirus, maybe, or maybe they lost their job? It could be some association to COVID-19, dumping animals, dropping them off at the shelter. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Initially, we did. Initially, when we announced that we were only going to be moving to emergency response due to limiting exposure of our staff and to the community, we did see an increase in not only animal abandonment, but also 911 calls that were being falsified so that people knew that they would get service, and in turn exposing my officers for unnecessary, the neighbor's dog peed in my yard once kind of situations. Fortunately, once we started addressing this with the community and told them that this was becoming an issue, within the last 2 weeks, we have not had the same issue that we did at the beginning of the pandemic.
Well, stay tuned for questions from our audience. Cindy, could you tell us a little bit about what you're experiencing and what NACA says to do? Thank you.
Well, one of the first things I would like to mention is that currently the National Animal Care and Control Association is offering a 3-month free membership to anybody in the animal care and control profession. So hopefully you'll take advantage of this. On their website, there's many good protocols and statements regarding COVID-19 and different ideas on allowing for fosters, different new protocols for releasing unsterilized animals. If you can't get them sterilized before, I know that the whole goal is to release for any of the animals that are adopted to have them sterilized before being released, but with the shortage of PPE that, to waive that during the meantime. One of the issues that we found several places is the lack of PPE for animal shelter employees. I actually went to my fire department, and they realizing that we would be the ones that would have to contain any animals if they did have to enter a home with animals in it. They were more than happy to give us plenty of masks to ensure not only my staff safety, but the EMS paramedics and safety also, as far as ensuring that we will enter a house. One of the things I did, which what most shelters are not set up to do, is to actually do the isolation. There's a difference between quarantine and isolation. Isolation is that the animal should not be around any other animals. And with that, I actually set up a isolation pen in our Sallyport area that is not even in our building. And I know many of the big, the large metro shelters would have separate rooms to house animals, but most of your rural shelters do not. In the pretty spring weather, most animals would do fine outside. So, you know, think about setting up something like that. I just went to Tractor Supply and got a 5x10 welded wire kennel that was actually big enough that if I needed to put a rolling cat cage in it, I could. We're putting plywood on the top, so it would really make sure that no animal could escape. But again, they would be in a completely different airflow from any other animals in the shelter. So not necessarily the best you would want to do, but it's better to be prepared, because if we did have to take in an animal, especially a cat that may be contagious to another cat, we're not sure yet, we wouldn't want that animal in the shelter. We are working on emergency calls only at this point. Again, our community really came forward and our shelter is pretty much cleared. Right now, we are only taking in aggressive or bite cases or sick or injured. Not necessarily how we want to run all our operations, but we are on very limited staff and just doing the best we can to get by. But the best thing I can tell anybody to do is go join NACA for the 3-month trial membership. You will have access to all of the NACA guidelines and statements regarding this, and they are continually updating their protocols and suggestions.
Great. Cindy, we'll come back to you for questions. And Jason, with Department of Ag, could you tell us what you'd like us to hear?
Yes, I guess to start out, Department of Agriculture is an essential service in the state. We are continued operations, skeleton crews in the Atlanta offices. Field personnel is obviously at home teleworking as much as possible. They will be in the field in approved or emergency situations only, with necessary PPE and, you know, social distancing as much as possible. Within the particular department, what we've done with licensees throughout the state, for those that don't know how we operate, our department actually does license animal businesses throughout the state. So you have kennels and you have animal shelters, you have rescues. We are still continuing those. Phones are forwarded to our people every day. We have people, we're still taking applications. We're still, you know, going through the complaint systems. All of those things, they will be answered, whether it's by phone or we have to put somebody in the field. We did start out, as soon as this started hitting, teleworking from home has allowed us to perform surveys with all of our licensees, where we've gathered information that will help us as we move forward and finding out how they're being affected in this situation. What we are finding is that most of them have tried to continue operations on a limited basis if they can. You know, the animals need that assistance. Essential services, healthcare professionals need that assistance. Their animals have to be somewhere in these situations being cared for, since they're working around the clocks. Our veterinarians are in communication with CDC and other veterinarians throughout the country, keeping up with information. One of the things that we're also doing is, if you go to our website at agr.georgia.gov, there's a list of contacts there. There's a list of information there you can get a hold of. That is constantly updated. What we did find is what Madi and Cindy have already referred to, where rescues have stepped up, despite some shelters that have had to close their doors or go to only emergency situations. Rescues have stepped up, foster homes have stepped up. Those places have been emptied out. We're seeing a lot of curbside service, you know, that type thing where they're using PPE and just providing that service as they can. A lot of them have been referred to their locals to determine whether that's a situation they can continue operating or not. Local authorities can determine that, or they can go to the economic development number and find out there as well. So but we are in contact with them, and we are providing services, and they're continue to operate as best they can to provide the services that their communities and their healthcare professionals need.
Great, thank you, Jason. And Venessa, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you to the Animal Protection Society and commending you on having this outreach. I wanted to mention a couple of different resources that people can access. As she stated, I serve as the board president for the National Alliance of State Animal and Agriculture Emergency Programs. And we have had and been monitoring and tracking the COVID-19 situation. If you go to THENASSAEP.com, and I will put that in the chat box. There is a reference to our monthly calls. There was discussion yesterday on the monthly call about the tiger incident, and Dr. Haley Murphy from Zoo Atlanta participated and talked about works with the Grade 8 Project, as well as Karen Telio, who helped work that particular case. I did want to say, just to reiterate what Dr. J shared, that there are big cats, tigers have respiratory issues. Anyway, there is no concern for cats related to that. The meeting was recorded, and it should be up on our website later this week for those who are interested. We're also looking at having a COVID-19 best practices tab that includes resources across the nation with plans, et cetera. And so we're in the preliminary stages. Of course, the Washington State Department of Agriculture has been taking the lead, with them being one of the initial hotspots in the state. One of the projects that they're doing in the state of Washington, as well as the University of Wisconsin, is that they are looking at testing animals from known positive locations that have happened in Washington state. And Dr. Minden Buswell, who also serves on the NACET board, has put their Washington State Department of Agriculture sampling guidance out on the NACET website. So you will find that as well under the monthly call tab. Also, one of our partners is the National Animal Rescue Sheltering Coalition, which NACA is a part of, and Cindy also serves on that role. They are looking at hosting a national animal feeding task force to just reduce duplication of effort and services. And as you all know, I'm just going to share the Georgia jobless number. As of this week, it's 388,000. And so many of us have been having discussions about the pet feeding problem, whether it's companion animals, exotic animals, equine, livestock. And so here in Georgia, the Georgia COVID-19 Animal Feeding and Resource Task Force, we're going to have our initial meeting. And it has representatives from across the state, from multiple organizations that are going to be talking about some of these issues as well. In my role as NACET board president, I also serve on the National Animal Emergency Management Task Force, and that includes representatives from Health and Human Services, their National Veterinary Response Team, USDA, FEMA, as well as many representatives from NARSC and the American Veterinary Medical Association. And so we are all asking that if you all have questions, you can certainly submit those to Claudine and the Animal Protection Society. We want to know what your questions are related to COVID-19, what the issues are, what the challenges are, so that we can try to get answers for you. One of the ongoing efforts that NASIP and NARSC is chairing right now is we have requested a meeting with FEMA Public Assistance related to what exactly is going to be covered. As you heard, several other representatives mentioned this pandemic is unlike anything we have encountered, and you know how we're trying to address our planning and response efforts is new and evolving and changing day by day. And so we just we're going to have we have a list of questions, and there are going to be ongoing discussions with FEMA Public Assistance. And so that applies to many of you, especially on the city county side. I also want to mention NARSC is looking at coming out with some guidance and having some videos and awareness, whether that is going to be through NASIP or other venues, to help provide support on what you need to know. And so, you know, one of the things as far as action items, I commend Claudine for showcasing the pets, the pandemic, and having a plan. We are advocating that communities do have an animal disaster plan. If you go and listen to the video, Dr. Robin Brennan, who is, she serves on the National Veterinary Response Team, but she helps to run the shelter that services New York City. And so, of course, they have had to come out with a plan on how they're looking at and addressing these issues. And they've talked about, you know, fostering and going and sheltering in place, especially with cats. And so I, again, encourage you to go and listen to the phone call once it does go live. And looking at fosters and kennels. But, you know, one of the takeaways about having a plan is, one, that you do need to know your local EMA director. You know, think about memorandums of agreement and memorandums of understanding. And I don't know if Claudine in the group, if they've had conversations about that, but I know we always get questions on, you know, what you should include. But under the FEMA Public Assistance, if you are going to get reimbursed, you know, having those memorandums of understanding are important and critical for the reimbursement process. And so I wanted to just echo Dr. J's comments, some of the messaging that we have been talking about again at the national level, and that Dr. Karen Tilio highlighted. She's with the University of Illinois. She's their pathology chief and just very well respected, but, you know, just following CDC guidance and, you know, when you're ill, to distance and follow and have a plan on who your caretakers are going to be. And so some of the discussion, you know, that we've been talking about at the national level is, you know, for those individuals, those vulnerable populations who don't have someone to take those animals. And so those are some follow-on planning discussions and considerations we need to have in Georgia. Also related to that, you know, we are coming into hurricane season, but we've also been looking at severe weather issues. And, you know, Dr. J was talking about having proper and adequate personal protective equipment and that type of thing. And so again, what is the plan? Because congregate sheltering is kind of off the table in this current environment. And so again, what is going to happen with the animals? And again, listening to Dr. Brennan's discussion yesterday about cats and what may be the best methodology to service them. And I just also wanted to follow on the PPE comment that Dr. J shared. Please speak now, today, with your local leadership on, you know, what your guidance is for PPE, boot covers, having a mask of some type. I know that there has been this ongoing discussion, you know, in the shortage with the healthcare workers and personal protective equipment, but there are other methodologies, and we do strongly encourage you that if you're going to be going around these animals, that you take appropriate protective measures because it's important, safety first for you and your staff. And one last comment is just the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, does have a list of disinfectants that are applicable to COVID-19, that are effective for COVID-19. And I'm just going to share a document that was shared with our NACIP membership on a list of organizations, whether it was USDA, FDA, AVMA, NACA, EPA, just again, NARS, trusted websites, because this information is continually evolving on a day-by-day basis. And so being able to go to those organizations, you know, for the best, most current guidance document. And again, I just commend you guys for having this information sharing.
Vanessa, thank you. That was so informative. And everybody on the panel will have a moment to send some more comments in. Let's take a few questions real quick. One of the questions that we have comes from one of our viewers. And have efforts been made to relax telemedicine restrictions in Georgia for veterinarians to provide continual needed public service, but also to protect veterinarians? And I want to bring to your attention our good friend Susan Blevins with the Georgia Veterinary Medical Association recently did a town hall meeting, and they have some great information there that we'll link that to our site as well. And the answer to that question is no, that the Georgia State Board of Veterinary Medicine has not relaxed telemedicine requirements. You must still have seen the animal in the last 12 months and have an informed consent with your client. There is information on the GVMA website, and we they're doing another town hall meeting tonight at 7:30. So we are staying in tune with everyone here that whatever they're linking on their sites, we're going to try to do the same. Like I said, we have petsandcovid19.com, which is linked to our site. Here's a question for any one of our panelists. Maybe Dr. J can take it. The question is, can regular walking the dog expose the family to coronavirus? And then also, how does it affect farm animals? Dr. J.
Well, good question. Yeah, certainly, there's some minimal level of exposure potentially with anything we do, just possibly the virus being in the environment. But no, I think dog walks in an open environment are a great idea. Good for us, good for the dog, get some fresh air, and probably preferable where possible to being in an enclosed environment where I think your risk is for any infection is going to be a lot higher. So yeah, just again, good hygiene. I wouldn't touch things you don't need to touch. I wouldn't let your dog drink from the communal water bowl that's at the dog park or at the county picnic shelter. And yeah, I don't think I would spend a lot of time touching the picnic tables or using the porta potty there if you don't have to. But yeah, just again, common sense. Wash your hands when you get home. Ideally, if you have real concerns, take a bath or a shower, change your clothes. Those are not a bad idea if you think you've had any potential exposure. But no, dog walking, I think, is excellent idea. I do know in some areas, and I think on a national level, this may have occurred, and then states can make up their own minds, but the typical recommendation or requirement for veterinarians to have a veterinary client-patient relationship has been waived because of the difficulties of the circumstance. I think in some jurisdictions, and again, each state may be different, but this has opened up the telemedicine capability for a lot of veterinarians, and certainly an area where we're having to explore more because of the circumstances. I did want to give a shout out to a group in Kansas City. It's called The Greater Good, and they actually are a philanthropic group involved with a lot of different areas of trying to support the community and the country. They have an animal rescue site, and actually, if you search the internet for Stay Home and Foster, all one word, Stay Home and Foster, you will get a site that has two different lists that you can sign up for. One is for people that are foster capable and foster willing to get their names out on a national database. The other form that pops up if you look at that site is a site for shelters and rescue groups to fill out and get on the national database, indicating their level of need for fostering or adoptions. And so this is a really remarkable site that the Greater Good organization is going to oversee in hopes of linking up people that can foster animals in a given area to the shelters and rescue groups that need that help. So Stay Home and Foster, search for that on the internet. I almost guarantee you'll get that hit. to that website, and on that site you'll see access to the 2 different forms. And I encourage everybody, share those sites with all of your friends, your family, and also reach out. I think as veterinarians, we can call our customers, our clients, and check in with them. Grandma Gertie, I know you may be alone. Do you have somebody to help you? Do you have somebody to help take care of your pets if you fall ill or need some assistance? How can we help? Reach out. A lot of this is going to be grassroots, guys. There aren't a lot of organizations that have this capability to do it all for everybody all the time. So we need to step up as neighbors and good citizens and sisters and brothers and friends and family to our colleagues and folks on the street. So a couple things there. Yeah, Claudine, I'll sign off for that.
Okay, great. We're getting a lot of questions. One of the things I'll mention too is people are asking about food banks for pet supplies and food banks, and we're going to be posting on our site links to those. Here's an interesting question. Many rescues have adopters for their dogs, but they cannot adopt them out yet due to the holding for spay and neuter surgeries. And there's a flurry of information stating adoption solutions for spay and neuters and rescues must follow. Maybe Jason or someone on this panel can answer that question. What do we do about that?
So within the Department of Agriculture rules and guidelines, a shelter or a rescue, a humane society can actually adopt those animals out without the spay neuter. What has actually occurred over a period of time is that because they don't have the staff to follow up on whether that has been done in most cases after the animal is adopted, most shelters and rescues humane societies have made the move to doing that as a policy before the animal leaves. An animal can be adopted out. There's a certificate that can be given, allows 30 days to do that. And the thing is, they would need to follow up after. If it was followed up on and it had not been done, now in these circumstances, there may be allowances, but in normal circumstance, if that had occurred, there was a follow-up for that had not been done by the adopter in that 30-day period, there's a citation legally can be issued to do that, or based on contractual agreements of the shelter humane society, the animal could be taken back. If they wish to do that, they can during this time. They would just need to follow up. Like I said, there may be some extenuating circumstances given this COVID-19 that must be, they might need to extend that or work with that person based on what the veterinarians can do during that time.
Thank you, Jason. So we have about 10 minutes left, and we're going to spend the next 5 minutes. We'll do 2 more questions, and I just want to remind the audience that we will have a follow-up series on this entire program, COVID-19 and pets. And one of the questions I'm getting is what services are animal control services doing at this time? And most of those deal with emergency services. We have some background noise there. I don't know if someone can mute their scene. Okay, so one of the things we're hearing is that if there's an animal bite or if there's an injured animal and there's no human to care for that animal, those would be considered emergency services. And believe it or not, we're seeing an uptick in dog bites among delivery personnel because we have a lot more deliveries, Amazon delivering and UPS. Naturally, people are at home and more dogs are with the family, which means more dogs are protecting their families. So I do expect an uptick in dog bites. Here's an interesting question, and this is very technical. So Dr. J, this will be for you. I've been reading myself about these articles related to doorknob receptors. Do biologists have any insight as to what make other particular species more or less susceptible to the transition of COVID-19? Why does a cat, for example, or a ferret have similar receptors as in humans?
Well, this really just relates back to fundamental genetics and evolution, and just the fact that certain animals, for better or for worse, have certain cell types and receptor types that relate to their internal systems. And viruses, keep in mind, a lot of people forget that viruses arguably are not living. They need a cell from another creature or organism to multiply. They've got to get into that other creature's cell to multiply, reproduce, and then extricate themselves from that cell and spread their little baby virus particles out to find their own new cells to get into. And so each virus has its particular affinity or proclivity for certain types of cells. And as it turns out, certain species of animals have those types of cells and others don't. And in the case of COVID-19, ferrets, cats, dogs, I believe swine, pigs also have that particular cell or receptor type. And some have it in more abundance, so maybe more accessible to the virus if it invades a host than others. Some of the things we're trying to figure out. But yeah, it just is a function of evolution and different dynamics there. But yeah, good, very technical question.
Let me throw these two out here. This is a step-by-step request. If one of your employees in your shelter test positive or show signs of this illness, what are the steps to protect other employees and ensure that there's enough staff to care for animals? And the answer to that is not specific. Basically, obviously, that person needs to be sent home and quarantined, and everybody they came in contact need to do the same. So you really need to find some backup personnel in case this happens. And we have more on that step-by-step program on our website. The other question was, how do we explain to our donors and supporters why we're only taking emergency cases and not strays from the public? It seems to them that we're turning our backs on them during this time. Everybody is suffering from donor relations right now. Charities are in deep trouble right now because most people are not donating. The truth of the matter is you need to explain this, preferably on your website, explain the circumstances that you're going through. Many of the shelters are now full and cannot take strays. So coming up with a great fostering program is going to help you here. But my answer to that question is be straight up with the donors and be honest and say, look, this is unprecedented times. We have full shelters. We can't take anymore. And crowding 12 dogs into one tiny cage is not appropriate. It can be bad for the animals themselves. And so fostering is crucial. And be straight up with your donors. And we find that most shelters are doing just that. I'm going to ask any of our panelists if there's something very important they want to say to the audience before we check out. We've got about 8 minutes. So is there anyone on our panelists that have heard a question or want to give a rebuttal to anything we've talked about today?
I did want to share, and I put in the chat that there is CDC guidance on suspected or known COVID instructions and what to do with employees. I know as far as the essential workforce, you know, those reports are going to local public health. That information is being shared with state public health. And again, they are working with industry partners. So if within your organization, if you feel that there is a problem with cases, then, you know, you just, as Claudine indicated, you know, if someone is sick, if they're running a temperature, I know within some organizations, they have temperatures and staff, especially in the zoo and the exotic world, you know, they're having staff do temperature checks before they go in so that in order to, you know, prevent cross-contamination and that type of thing. But again, there is direct CDC guidance, and I will share that information so that they can provide those links to you. There are also on the CDC website, they have posters that can be put that it specifically talks about do's and don'ts, things to do and things not to do. And again, I will share that information with Claudine.
Great. Real quick, and Jason or Vanessa, this is very important, I think. Can you guys discuss the governor's executive order in order of pet care and veterinary services don't appear to be explicitly identified as essential services? If there are canines at shelters, is there a risk to putting those canines in play areas? So those are two separate questions, but could you explain to us the essential services that Governor Kemp has put in his order?
So I will say that the American Veterinary Medical Association has been working very closely with the Department of Homeland Security, the Critical Infrastructure Security Administration, cybersecurity information related to, you know, both looking at having vets identified on the list. They do indicate, even in the version 2 of that document, that CISA document, that it is not all encompassing. And so related to vets, the AVMA stance, I can't speak on behalf of them, but they are advocating that they are considered critical infrastructure, and many of them have been utilized or tapped to assist under One Health in the human health realm and providing services in that area. And what was the second question related to that?
It was, can we put canines in a play area without any concern? And I would start by saying, if they're showing any signs of any illness, the answer would be no. If somebody wants to give us a short, quick answer on that.
I'll have to divert to Dr. J on the vet side when you were talking about animals and cohabitation and that type of thing.
Yeah, and I'll let him address that too. I know, coming from a shelter director, how we would handle that situation is practically like you said, but I'll let Dr. J handle that. But going back to the essential services type thing, we've been getting a lot of that. We've actually been asked to post on our website a list of essential services, and are these facilities included? What everybody should know is that the Georgia Department of Agriculture is not the defining authority on that. We have referred that to the governor's shelter in place that is actually in force. We've also forwarded out the CISA information on that. So we cannot make the determination if something is an essential service or not. However, that question has been raised so much. What we are telling you is that these animals obviously have to be taken care of. What you need to do is work your best practice possible with social distancing and PPE, and what you need to in shelters and rescues and other animal business to make sure that these animals are taken care of. We're by no means telling you to, hey, abandon these animals and leave them with nothing. They have to be taken care of.
I will also add that USDA, they are advocating that animals, they're required to have care across the spectrum. And so the information that I've been sharing, having from USDA is that, it is essential that staff be available. But Claudine's point earlier, some institutions are rotating staff and making sure, they may have some work 7 days on, 7 days off, so that if people do get sick, you still have staff and or volunteers available in order to be able to go and provide that care.
This is Cindy, and just to add a little bit more on that, a lot of agencies have gone ahead and just posted the National Animal Care and Control Association guidelines on for essential services. Additionally, what I did for us is it went on the Facebook page, Newton County webpage, and was released to media. So everybody we did what we could to get the word out to as many people as we could, that we would be only responding to emergency services. As far as the shelter rotation and the limited staff, I'm actually running 2 different groups, Group A and Group B. Group A never should meet Group B, and Group B should never meet Group A. So in any situation, even if one person did test positive, I would have enough staff to operate on the emergency services, unless, of course, at this point somebody from each group went. But I've only got a staff of 8, so that's about the best I can do. But every day, every morning when we come in, we sanitize the doorknobs and everything on our way out. Same on the way out. So we're doing what we can. But one of the best things, if you've got enough staff where you can run 2 or even more completely separated shifts where those people never meet each other and never come in contact with each other, that's the best way to do it for the moment.
Great idea, Cindy. Well, with that, I got to tell the audience we have so many questions popping up, but there's just no time to get to them. So we will definitely take those into consideration and put our answers on the website. We're definitely going to have another one of these webinars. Our panelists are fantastic. Thank you for joining us today. I do want to remind you all that in September 25th and 26th, hopefully COVID-19 will be long in our history by then, but that is our 22nd annual Animal Protection Expo. And we're lucky to have Dr. Jay Tischendorf as one of our keynote speakers. And we're gonna address our agenda by putting a lot of this information, this is gonna be part of our conference this year, a lot of this information on COVID-19. So registration is currently open for that. Again, it's September 25th and 26th. It is at the Hotel Avalon in Alpharetta, Georgia, in conjunction with the Georgia Veterinary Medicine Association and their Vet South Conference. We had a huge success last year and looking forward to another one this year. Panelists and Dr. J, please take care of yourselves. Thank you so very much for your time today. And we've all enjoyed this and we hope you have too. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Great job.